Having a dark sky with little light pollution is often cited as one of the most important requirements to getting good astrophotography images of deep sky objects. A dark sky means less randomly scattered photons from sources other than space entering your detector of choice. You do have to do less work to reduce the noise and improve the signal-to-noise ratio of your data. It's like being in a quiet location where you can hear someone talking from a distance compared to a busy street where you have trouble hearing the person next to you. In this video, I'm going to do a completely non-scientific and subjective comparison between the night skies of Western Australia, where I live, and Namibia, which I visited recently. So what do you need to get a dark sky? Either no or few sources of light pollution and space to get away from those that exist. For amateur astrophotography purposes, these locations have to be accessible by road. Overall geography. Both Western Australia and Namibia are located on the western sides of their respective continents, which are Australia and Africa respectively. Both sit at about the same latitude, with WA centred on about 26 degrees south and Namibia at roughly 22 degrees south. Western Australia stretches further north and south than Namibia due to its larger size, which is a bit more than 2.5 million square kilometres, compared to Namibia at 825,000 square kilometres. So in African terms, Western Australia spans from about the southern tip of South Africa to about 3/4 of the way up Angola. Populations are low for both. Namibia at about 2.7 million and Western Australia at about 2.8. So the population density of Western Australia is about a third of Namibia, which rates it very low in world terms. Sources of light pollution. So let's start with Western Australia. We have two main sources of light pollution: population centres and mines. The distribution of population centres is very strange. The capital city, Perth, has an estimated population of about 2.2 million people. Yes, close to 80% of the population lives just in one city. By comparison, the second biggest population centre has about 80,000 people, and it falls off rapidly from there. This concentrates most of the light pollution into one area, doubly so since Bunbury is only about 170 kilometres from Perth. This southwestern corner of the state is where most people are concentrated. Mines are a surprising source of light pollution in Western Australia. There are a lot of large mines in very remote areas, and they operate 24/7 with large amounts of bright lighting to allow operations to continue through the night. If you look at a map of population centres, you'll find that in some areas that you would think would be totally dark, there are quite large mines liberally dotted around the area. It's not really a problem though. There are a lot of places with no towns and no mines, just dark and quiet, if you can get to them. Namibia. The biggest source of light pollution in Namibia would be population centres. The population is more evenly distributed, with the capital, Windhoek, having a population of about 430,000 people according to Wikipedia. I think this, like Perth, is the region not just of the city proper. The next biggest centre would be Walvis Bay and Swakopmund, which are close together on the west coast, which seems to have an area population of about 100,000 people. Mines. There seems to be some substantial mines in Namibia, but not to the extent that they exist in Western Australia. I don't think they contribute much to light pollution. Weather. Both locations are overall desert or savanna, with some estimates giving 300 sunny days per year for Windhoek. We were there in May and the weather was 90% clear, with the notable exception of the west coast. Here the Benguela current creates massive fog banks and cold conditions. It may still be sunny, but that would be 200 metres up above the fog. We experience fog every day in this area from Walvis Bay to Terrace Bay. Terrace Bay looks a bit like a subarctic settlement with weather to match. Not good for astro, but go 100 kilometres inland and you're back to clear skies. I couldn't find any figures for comparable locations in Western Australia, but for population centres at a similar latitude such as Meekatharra or Newman, I suspect it would be about the same. In Western Australia, the clearer weather at mid-latitudes is in the southern hemisphere winter, which is mild and pleasant. In the south of Western Australia, the winter, May to September, tends to be wet and cloudy. It's time to join the hordes of people that migrate north for the winter. One other thing in Namibia is the sunsets. I've never seen such gloriously consistent dramatic sunsets. I think it's caused by the fine dust low down that we call Namibian mist, but it doesn't seem to cause any problems higher in the sky. So far things have been pretty even between Namibia and Western Australia. In both places it's easy to get away from light pollution and find cloud-free Bortle 1 skies, but now we get into the differences. Topology. If you're looking for elevation to improve the seeing, then Western Australia doesn't have much to offer. The highest elevation in the state is 1,250 metres, and that's close to an area with a lot of the biggest mines. The interior of the state sits at a higher elevation than the coast, but only by a few hundred metres. That being said, we do get a significant number of clear, still nights that I hope to sample more of in the future. Namibia, on the other hand, has significant areas of elevation. One location we camped near the small settlement of Solitaire was over 1,100 metres in altitude. It's an arid area with low population density, clear skies, and I can personally vouch for the apple pie from the bakery. Locations with this type of climate and altitude are not hard to find in Namibia. The east of Namibia is higher, but we didn't see any of that area, so I can't comment on it. It would still not be densely populated, but I don't know if the extra altitude would make much difference. This brings us to, where do you stay? Here Namibia is the clear winner. In Western Australia, most of what accommodation there is in remote areas is in the population centres. Some locations such as Sandstone and Gascoyne Junction have good accommodation and low light pollution, but to get a really dark location you would have to set up a few kilometres away. Namibia, on the other hand, is a popular tourist destination without being too crowded. There's a lot of accommodation in remote areas with camping or cabins and on-site restaurants. Many are off-grid, which means low light levels at night. It would not be hard to find a spot where you could set up your camp or cabin and have little or no light pollution. We saw at least one lodge near Solitaire that advertised its suitability for astronomy. Can't remember the name now. If enough people throw money at me, I'm prepared to go back and find it and test drive it. One thing you'd have to watch in Namibia is wildlife, especially if setting up in a remote location. The wildlife is not yet restricted to parks, so in some areas you'd have to be aware of the possibility of predators such as lions. We're also warned not to leave anything outside because of baboons, but they're evidently not a problem at night. Seek local advice. Accessibility. Both locations have a similar problem with accessibility. With large areas and low population, many of the roads to the best locations are unpaved. This is more of an issue in Namibia than Western Australia. Most of the population centres have paved roads to them in Western Australia. But some sheep and cattle stations, that's what we call a ranch, have accommodation facilities and most would need to be accessed via unpaved roads. Both locations put a lot of effort into maintaining these unpaved roads, but they can get rough and cut up quickly. The roads to Solitaire are not anything I would happily transport anything like a Newtonian that needed collimation. I suspect 150 kilometres of these roads could actually damage a large telescope. If you have deep pockets, you might be able to fly in. A smaller refractor should be okay if in a padded case. Cost. Here again, Namibia is a clear winner. General expenses like food and fuel are cheaper there than in Western Australia. Camping was a bit cheaper if not the same, but normally with more remote areas available and with better facilities. With cabin type accommodation, I think the costs are about the same, but in Namibia there's more choice and I think you get more for your money. Western Australia is just an expensive place to live and visit, sorry. And if you forget things, basically if you forget astro stuff, as far as I know Namibia has no in-person shopping of that kind, but Perth has one decent astro shop. Nothing outside of Perth though. Online shopping is possible in both locations, but delivery might take a while. Don't forget tech things. Conclusion. Both places have quite easy access to dark, clear skies, but I'd have to give the award to Namibia for the following reasons. Elevation. It's easy to find a high elevation location. Even the capital, Windhoek, is higher than anywhere in Western Australia. Accommodation. Better choice of accommodation in remote and dark areas. Western Australia's visitors concentrate on the coast, and that's where the accommodation tends to be. Affordability. I'd have to say you get more for your money in Namibia when compared to Western Australia or Australia in general. Accessibility. If you live in Europe, then Namibia is relatively close by. Australia is not close to Europe or North America, but might be attractive if you live in Malaysia, Indonesia or PNG and want to take advantage of our dark skies. Postscript. Due to luggage limitations on this trip, I wasn't able to take any tracking gear, just a camera and a tripod. This is a picture I took from our campsite at Camp Gecko, and it's just 20 seconds with the camera mounted on a tripod. And you can see the Magellanic Clouds quite clearly in it. Anywhere much in Namibia away from a big town, you'll be able to see the Milky Way, no problems. If you can get yourself there, get there.